Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the few minutes delay there, a slight technical hitch. Can I start by welcoming you all to our first Cabinet meeting of 2024, so a Happy New Year to you all. It's nice to welcome you here today. We'll start then with item number 1, which are apologies for absence. We've got apologies from Councillor Marshall. Right, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay. Item number 3 on our agenda are the minutes from the November 2023 Cabinet, and these can be found on pages 3 to 16 of your packs. Colleagues, you've all had an opportunity to go through these minutes. First of all, is somebody happy to move these as a true record?
Can I make... there's a note of accuracy that I need to make before?
Of course.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to point out, in regards to the minutes on the item September review budget on page 5, I was inaccurately quoted. The comment needs to be changed because it says there were no spending reserves in Newport schools. To the statement I actually made was there has been an overspend of reserves by 5.4 million. Thank you. I'm sure it's just an error.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Apart from that one amendment with regard to accuracy, is everybody content? Thank you. We'll move then to item number 4 on our agenda, which is the 2024-25 Budget and Medium-Term Financial Plan. And colleagues, you've all had an opportunity to go through this information, which can be found on pages 17 to 122 of our packs. And this is our first report at Cabinet that deals with the 2024-25 Council budget. And this report introduces our draft budget proposals. The report outlines the key planning assumptions for the proposed budget, our budget investments and the savings that are required to produce a balanced annual budget, and also a budget which delivers sustainable future finances to ensure that our council continues to deliver services to residents of Newport and meet our priorities. The report also covers the consultation arrangements and the timetable for us to agree the final budget proposals to be considered at all council at the end of February. Now, colleagues, like many councils across Wales and the UK, we've started our budget consultation later than normal so that we have certainty on the council's core revenue support grant settlement. This enables us to have more certainty on our budget gap and take this into account. Now, in saying this today, colleagues, there is inevitably further work to complete before we agree our final budget proposals, and much of it will come from certain aspects of the settlement itself. But whilst the council budget does have a budget gap for 2024-25, I am pleased to confirm that based on our assumptions to date, and funding coming from the core settlement and council tax, the gap is lower than this time last year and in previous years. And the report today confirms a budget gap before savings of 3.8 million. Now, the budget gap arises because our funding is increasing at a lower rate than our cost increases. The report deals with these aspects in detail and provides the context and background to the budget setting, key assumptions on price and inflation increases, and the demand issues driving budget pressures and investments beyond those day-to-day cost and inflation increases. I'll go on now, colleagues, to provide a little more detail on key elements of the draft budget. The Council's budget is still subject, as you're all aware, to significant price and inflationary increases on pay and social care contracts. These are mainly driven by the significant increases in the UK minimum wage and more specifically here in Newport, the real living wage rates. The increase is smaller than anticipated back in February 2023, and that's because energy costs, which have significantly reduced. So we've kept some of that decrease back to invest it into a new match funding budget against Welsh Government grants for carbon reduction projects. However, as you know from your own experiences, demand on services continues to be our biggest challenge. We continue to see increases in children's social care and homelessness provision, with legacy issues of COVID and the current cost of living challenges impacting on both. These represent the biggest risks to the Council's future financial sustainability, and work is ongoing to develop plans to stabilise these to the extent possible. Whilst price and demand issues have continued from previous years, the relatively smaller budget gap arises because of the funding increases currently assumed in the draft budget proposals presented here. Newport received the highest percentage increase in its core funding settlement from the Welsh Government, and this was driven by various demographic factors, such as an increase in population, which means we get a bigger slice of the total funding available. The demographic data finally included the full impact of the last census data and was a contributory factor here. Our funding increased by 4.7%, which was a further £13.5 million of funding. We are consulting on an 8.5% increase in council tax. And I'd really like to point out the following with regard to this, as it provides important contextual information. Our starting point is lower than nearly all other councils in Wales and the UK. In cash terms, the increase is much lower than the percentage might suggest. The report shows that this would be £1.50 to £2.01 per week for those houses in Newport's most common bandings. It will still be one of the lowest council tax rates in Wales and the UK. Now, our council supports those who are in need and who are eligible for financial assistance with their council tax bill. Households suffering financial challenges will not pay this increase, as the council tax reduction scheme will support them with this. Therefore, whilst those who cannot afford this increase will continue to receive help with paying their council tax, it does protect services which benefits everyone, but most of all, those who are most vulnerable in our community. So, colleagues, I would ask everyone to look beyond the headline, to know that those who receive help with their bill will continue to receive it, and this increase protects essential services to our most vulnerable, while still maintaining it as one of the lowest council tax rates in Wales and the UK. And of course, the budget proposal isn't just about funding increases. We've also found savings in our budgets too. Because of the increased core settlement funding and, to a lesser extent, council tax funding increases, we have been able to protect and develop services. We're protecting the school budget. There are no savings requirements from school budgets next year. We'll be investing £9.5 million into budgets and £24 million over the MTFP period in teachers' cost increases and growth in our pupil numbers and schools. We continue to fund our Social Care Commission in budgets so that they can pay at least the living wage to employees. This provides support to this very fragile sector. It ensures our most vulnerable are supported. and provides wider social value and benefits into our communities. We're investing in a new budget to accelerate the Council's carbon reduction through creating match funding to use alongside Welsh Government funding for projects that do this. We continue to invest in our support for those with the greatest need and vulnerable within our communities, ensuring wherever possible they're supported here in Newport locally. We will be investing nearly £400,000 in our additional learning needs provision locally, £600,000 in our homelessness provision, and over £3 million in our children's and adult social care budgets for increased provision. Now, as I've said, we still have a budget gap to resolve, and our report sets out those savings. I'm really pleased to inform that the vast majority of these proposals will have no impact on service provision, and they're delegated for implementation by heads of service and directors. Lastly, as the report states, the medium-term funding outlook is very uncertain, but likely to be very challenging indeed. The Welsh Government is not forecast to receive a sufficient increase in its own budgets to be able to pass that on to local government, the NHS and other vital public services here in Wales. So we therefore call on the UK Government to increase the local government settlement to Welsh Government in its March statement to make more money available to councils to spend on vital services. To provide further context on this, colleagues, the current draft settlement provides only £305 million extra for the Welsh Government over a 2-year period, 2 years. In the current high-cost environment and faced with an unprecedented increase in demand for our essential services, it simply isn't enough. UK Government needs to step up on this particular funding issue. So I'll pause here, colleagues, just for comments and on the proposals. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I completely agree with you. We're in a far better position this time last year, facing a £3.8 million shortfall in comparison to the £15 million shortfall we had to manage at this same stage. This is against the challenging backdrop of inflation, increasing staff costs, labour shortages and increasing demand. And it's important to note that the financial pressures facing this council continue, and these pressures account for nearly 56 million or 76% of total investment which will be required over the next 3 years. In education, additional funding amounting to 9.5 million just to cover pay awards and the cost of managing the increase in pupil numbers is necessary, with this amounting to 24 million over the next 3 years. So as the leader states, as we will be protecting schools' budgets, and which we, as you know, this is something that is so important and so needed at this point in time. We will see budgetary pressures where grant funding has been reduced in certain areas, alongside the increasing concerns we have regarding homelessness, which will mean increasing demands on our services. In the forthcoming financial year, we're anticipating a budget which will be far more of a challenge to balance, and this, of course, alongside those global events which we have seen impact on our economy. Essentially, we're a hostage to whatever happens in an increasingly precarious world where we're seeing increasing conflict and the impacts of global warming, and this is a very real worry. Therefore, I support the proposed budget savings, but very much welcome the consultation that's about to be launched. We are a listening council, and if residents can help us with ideas and alternative solutions to some of the difficult decisions that are under consideration, this is always very much welcomed. Part of this consultation exercise will include the proposal to increase council tax by 8.5%. If this is agreed at full council on 29th of February, we will still be a local authority where residents will continue to pay one of the lowest amounts in Wales, as the leader has already stated. Where residents live alone or on a low income, they can apply for support from the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Conversely, the higher the council tax rate is set will enable more residents to become beneficiaries of this grant. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader, and of course those are all important points you make about the council tax reduction scheme. Thank you. Any further comment? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. Okay, we were told by this UK government that the economic turnaround is just around the corner, whilst in the real world we're still in a cost of living crisis, with prices still increasing and certainly not coming down. This is why budgets are so tough. But as well as being cabinet members, we're also councillors, but also we're residents of Newport. So we have to make the right decisions for all. As always, I urge all residents to get involved in this consultation, and their views are important. I would add that of course things are not perfect, but what is in the consultation are the real needs being met in a balanced budget. You will see on social media and other platforms from opposition parties how they're going to change the world. But I'll go back to, this has to be a balanced budget. And finally, and I hope this is taken up by the media, if the UK government hadn't given 11 billion in corporate tax breaks in the autumn statement, and they'd collected the 8.7 billion owed in the PPE contracts they issued. So let's work that out. 11 billion and 8.7 billion written off. If all that was in place, would not only Newport but elsewhere have more money for their residents? The answer is yes. So I support. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Clark, and making those important observations about the decisions, because they are choices that the UK government has made around finance in this country. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say something about the real need. And before I say that, I just reflect on Christmas, and I hope everybody had a good Christmas and a bit of a rest. And I managed to watch a couple of films, as I suppose a lot of people possibly did over Christmas. And one of them was 13 Lives, about the story of the 13 boys who were rescued from a cave in Thailand, and the absolutely incredible skills of those divers that got them out. And then I also happened to watch Nicholas Winton and the hundreds of children that they managed to rescue from Czechoslovakia in 1939. And they were both very emotional films. So when I turned to read the Cabinet Papers, I didn't really expect to find anything particularly emotional in the budget, because they're difficult reading, a lot of reading. But what I came across, and apologies to stepping on your portfolio, Councillor Hughes, was the estimate for adult services and how much money they need to run those services. And the line I came across, which I thought was really quite moving, was adults who have ageing carers who can no longer support them. So we all possibly know of some of those difficult situations where people have spent their lives looking after their children, and then it comes to a stage in their life and they can't manage it anymore, and how really difficult that is. But thank goodness the council is there to help people in those situations. So we've talked about vulnerable people and the needs that vulnerable people have, and what I can say is some of it is quite emotional, and it's really people that need that help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey, and thank you so much for giving us all that really important reminder that the focus of this is very much about people. Thank you. Any further comments from Cabinet colleagues on this item? Okay. So, as noted in the report, we've been asked to consider and approve the following recommendations as the basis for our budget consultation, so that we can take these into account wherever possible in our final budget decisions, which will be in February. So our approval today, as you know, is that we will go out to consult on our proposals, and we're consulting on the budget savings proposals, a council tax increase of 8.5%, the proposed fees and charges, and the budget investments also shown in Appendix 1, including those for schools. We're also being asked to approve the implementation of delegated decisions in Appendix 3 and Appendix 11, the detailed proposals set out by heads of service with immediate effect following the usual council decision-making processes. Are colleagues content to agree all of those recommendations? Thank you for that. Thank you also, colleagues, for your support in the development of this budget and developing these budget proposals, and the guidance and support that you've given to senior officers across your portfolios. We've had really challenging experiences this year bringing us to this point. And I'd like to thank all of our service areas for the work that they've done to help us come together with these budget proposals, particularly in terms of bringing us to a point where we are able to demonstrate that we will be able to deliver a balanced budget going forwards into the next financial year. So a huge thank you to both colleagues and officers, and within that, of course, particularly the finance team who've worked so hard to bring us to this point. Thank you. We'll move then to item number 5 on our agenda, which is the November Revenue Budget Monitor. This is on pages 123 to 138 of our packs. And the report explains the current financial position on the Council's revenue budget and the financial risks and opportunities that present themselves within that November update. Now, this is the third revenue monitor that's been presented to Cabinet this financial year, and it reflects an underspend of £2.523 million, which is a £1 million reduction on the September figures. So between September and November, that figure is reduced by £1 million. And that really is a very accurate reflection of the intensity of demand upon service provision. And the change is mainly due to increased costs in relation to homelessness and temporary accommodation. The position takes into account the contingency budget and the anticipated in-year underspend against capital financing budgets. Whilst an overall underspend is projected, it should be noted that service areas are collectively forecast to overspend by £4.7 million this year, excluding our schools. Now, this update provides confirmation that some of the known risks, as at the start of the year, have materialised, and they are causing significant overspends, especially within children's services and housing. However, as anticipated, it's currently proving possible to offset service area overspends with the general contingency and underspends within capital financing. It's important for us to consider some of the key areas that contribute to this position, and some of those key variances include increased demands across key social care areas, including children's out of area and emergency placements. And I'd like to go back to the point that Councillor Forsey was making in terms of emphasising that this really is about the services we provide for people, keeping people safe, taking care of people. This increase in demand for children's placements, emergency placements and out-of-area placements, these two areas alone contribute to an overspend of almost £3.9 million to the overall service provision. This is the reality of how much it costs to ensure that we are fulfilling our statutory duties and taking care of people. We also need to consider the increased demand within adults' residential and non-residential service, which also contributes 1.5 million to the overall service position. Now, this has, however, been offset by the overachievement of community care income as a result of an increased number of users contributing to their care. You'll all be aware, colleagues, of the significant pressures that we're experiencing right across the country at this point in time, but particularly intense pressures here in Newport with regard to housing and communities, particularly in relation to homelessness. And despite the Council allocating a significant budget increase for 2023-24 to address the ongoing impact of the overspend which we incurred last year, costs have been increasing further, and an overspend of £2.4 million is being projected. This is an area that's seen a significant increase in costs over the last 2 years, following the Welsh Government's policy aim to dramatically reduce homelessness. The requirements of this policy have led to an unprecedented upturn in demand for temporary accommodation, for which the costs are not fully covered by service user contributions or housing benefit, leaving the Council to incur the net cost. And I do want to make a really important point here because, colleagues, you will recall the Chancellor, the UK Government Chancellor, did make an announcement in the autumn statement regarding financial support in terms of the local housing allowance and the levels of local housing allowance to support people with this. It needs to be remembered, however, that the pressures that we're starting to see around housing and homelessness provision have a direct correlation with policy decisions that have been made at UK government level, particularly those policy decisions that have affected interest rates and mortgage rates across the UK. And we are certainly starting to see families be impacted by this now. We also know that demand for housing and homelessness services is at unprecedented levels due to other factors. They include the cost of living crisis, the continued austerity, expansion of our duties, and also the Home Office streamlined asylum process. We've got intense levels of high demand, coupled with a low supply of accommodation. And that means that as a council, when looking to fulfil our statutory duties around homelessness, we are reliant on expensive forms of temporary accommodation. Now, I'd just like to set this in context for you, colleagues. So that means that we're reliant on bed and breakfast accommodation, high street hotels, specialist temporary accommodation providers. And to contextualise this, the shortfall for a family with a 2-bedroom need in a hotel is £65 per night, or the equivalent of around £23,000 per year. Further to this, as a council, we're also required to employ additional staff to meet our expanded statutory duties. And we currently run accommodation with security for people with very complex needs due to the lack of availability of supported housing across our city. This really is unprecedented. The levels are unprecedented. The level of challenge is unprecedented. And I welcome the support that we've received from our partners, the work that our officers are doing in terms of trying to address these issues, and the support of the Royal Foundation looking to develop new solutions to these challenges with us. However, to go back to the point that I made about UK government in on the previous item, we do need UK government to really step up to the mark on this particular issue, because this is a problem that the whole of society faces. Now, within our update, we can also see that there are forecast underspends against non-service budgets, specifically the general contingency and capital financing. The savings in those areas, colleagues, are set out within the report, and they're more than offsetting the net service area underspends, resulting in an overall underspend for the whole council. But I think what's really important is that when we're considering this, we have to look at the imbalance there between services, particularly those demand-led services. There is an anticipated shortfall against the delivery of 2023-24 and prior year savings of over 1.1 million. And the two services responsible for the majority of the shortfall are adult services and housing and communities. And that, given the discussion that we've already had to date, will not come as a surprise to anyone. Turning to focus on our schools position, as school variances are managed through individual schools' balances, the overall underspend of 2.5 million doesn't include the schools' position. Schools are collectively forecasting an overspend against budget of 4.6 million, which would see balances reduced from 14.4 million to 9.8 million by the end of the financial year. In light of the significant level of savings that schools need to deliver during 2023-24 and the level of recurring expenditure included within the 4.6 million overspend, officers will continue to closely monitor school balances over the medium term as part of the Council's deficit avoidance and prevention strategy. What's important to note here today, colleagues, as we consider this report, is that although the financial year is into its final quarter, there does remain a risk that the position could worsen between now and March. As we've discussed at length today, these risks are mainly in relation to demand-led services, which are volatile in their nature and can result in costs increasing very rapidly, as evidenced by the recent increase in the housing overspend. Therefore, there does remain the possibility that the position could change between now and the year end. Now, given that there is a risk that this position could change and an overspend or reduced underspend emerge, efforts must continue to be made to mitigate overspending within service areas and bring the service area position back towards a balanced position by the end of the year. Now, at this point, colleagues, I'd just like to pause and open up to any comments that you may have. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I just wish to refer to the education budget. As you quite rightly stated, it's good to see that the school reserves have reduced to a 4.6 million overspend. However, this is still a concern. It remains a concern. And I know where schools are at risk of setting a deficit budget. We are giving absolute support to make sure it doesn't happen. But the risk is next year. The risk absolutely is next year, where more schools will potentially have more in-year deficits and set a deficit budget, and we are robustly managing that. But my argument is, as you quite rightly point out, it's about our national government and our complete lack of focus on public sector funding. The autumn statement showed us nothing. We absolutely need a change in government, a government who cares about public sector, public performance, and importantly, our children in schools, and that's just not happening at this point in time. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Batruni.
Thank you, Leader. I suppose I would reserve my comments for this item and the previous item to say what this shows us and the previous item shows us is the growing pains of success. People want to live, work and play in Newport, and that means growing pressures in our schools, highlighted by Councillor Davis, and pressures on adult services as people want to live out their lives in this wonderful city, which is not supported, as highlighted by Councillor Clark, by the woeful UK government. But we shouldn't underestimate that people want to live in Newport and work in Newport and live out their lives in Newport, and we should be proud of that. And our services are starting to reflect that demand, never so much so as housing. People want to live here, and it pushes everything up. And so we have to be mindful that success breeds greater demands, that we're up for those demands, and that we'll deliver on those demands. And anyone who thinks that they can solve the budget by reducing our council tax rates or reducing this or reducing that are selling this city short and its residents.
Absolutely, Councillor Petruni. I couldn't agree with you more, and I know that colleagues do as well. Absolutely right. Any further contributions from colleagues on that item? Okay then, so as a Cabinet, we're being asked to note the overall budget forecast position outlined within this report, to note the risks identified throughout the report, to note the overall shortfall in the delivery of savings accepted as part of the 23-24 revenue budget, to note the forecast movements in reserves, and to note the overall position in relation to schools, acknowledging the risk that some individual deficit positions could well emerge, as we've heard today, by the end of the financial year. Is everyone content to approve the report? Yeah. Thank you, and thank you very much, colleagues, for your contributions to that discussion here today. And it's quite interesting, actually, going back to Councillor Petruni's really important points there about the growing pressures of a growing city, as we move on to our next item, which is our item number 6, the Capital Programme Monitoring and Additions Report. And this is the Capital Programme Monitoring and Additions Report for November 2023. It's our third monitoring report of the year on capital activity, and it provides us with an overview of the updated capital programme, along with a projected outturn position as of November. As part of this, the report provides us with an update on the level of available capital headroom and also details the additions to the programme that have been identified. And of course, colleagues, it seeks our approval for these additions. So turning to the report itself, the first section outlines the movement in the capital budget since the last report, which was presented to Cabinet in September, which was the September 23-24 Monitoring and Additions Report. The net value of additions and amendments to the current capital programme in 23-24 since then is £3 million, and there is a breakdown of these additions in Appendix A of the report. And you will see, colleagues, from considering that the majority of the new additions are being funded via external grants. We're asked to approve these additions and the amendments, and as a result of these additions, as at November 23, the current budget for 23-24 is now £93.2 million, which remains a substantial capital budget and will be challenging to deliver in full. And that's also an important point. And you will find within the report an outline of the level of slippage being forecast against the revised £93.2 million budget. At this time, a variance of around £9.6 million is being projected. Now, the majority of this relates to slippage, with the balance relating to net underspends. The slippage currently being forecast is largely down to issues being encountered in relation to a small number of large schemes, and the full breakdown of that slippage is available in Appendix B. The report notes that these figures are subject to continual review and may change between now and the end of the financial year. At this stage, colleagues, we're asked to simply note the level of slippage, with our approval only being sought at the end of the year as part of the outturn report. Turning to capital headroom, the report also details the level of capital headroom currently available, which can be used to support new schemes and emerging priorities. This now stands at £8.259 million, and there have been no changes in the headroom from that which was reported in September's monitoring report. Whilst the level of available headroom is higher than it was a year ago, it should also be noted that it only takes a few significant issues to arise before this headroom being completely consumed. The use of this really does need to be tightly controlled so that the Council is able to respond to any critical issues as and when they emerge. This will require clear prioritisation of only the most urgent and pressing issues. In addition, any opportunity to further increase the headroom will need to be taken so that it is possible to support as many priorities as possible and ensure that sufficient funding exists to respond to any issues that do arise. Now, colleagues, you've heard me say this many times, and I shall repeat myself again today. So as outlined in previous reports, these regular updates now include information on the Council's compliance with its prudential and Treasury management indicators. As you can see in Appendix D, the Council is fully compliant with all of its indicators as at the 30th of November 2023. So just pause at this point then and open up for any comments on this particular item. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted to note within the report that reference has been made to the ALN grant funding which we've received from Welsh Government. Monies have been allocated to a number of schools to improve provision, but what is especially worth mentioning is the 510,000 which is being allocated to My Cebu, which will be used to replace and upgrade the outdoor play and learning facilities, as well as upgrading some of the toilets. This funding is much needed by one of our most valued schools in Newport, and having seen for myself the necessity in making these improvements, I am so pleased that we've been able to make this funding allocation. I am confident that this will have a positive impact on learning and, importantly, well-being within the school. Equally, 100,000 has been allocated to Ysgol Brenderu for the Kimberley site, and a portion of this will be spent to improve outdoor play facilities. Again, another outstanding school where children are thriving and learning in an appropriately supportive and caring environment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Thank you. Councillor Petruni.
It was on that point, Leader, as a governor of my Cebu, I don't have to declare an interest, but there you go, there it is. But to thank the Cabinet member for listening to the teachers and the head teacher and the parents and the children. I've recently been made a governor, and I walked around that school, and I tell you what, you really have, you're in awe straight away of the dedication of staff to those children. And we've put our money where our mouth is, haven't we, Leader? And that's where our priorities are, with those children and those families. And I'm proud to be in the Cabinet for it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Petruni. Thank you very much. Any additional comments on this item? Okay. So, colleagues, we're asked to approve the additions and amendments which are detailed in the report. We're also asked to note the slippage reported, as well as the level of capital headroom available, and note the authority's compliance with prudential indicators which are included in the report. Colleagues content to do so? Thank you. Thank you all for that. And once again, thank you to the finance team for all the work that they've done with regard to those reports. We move now then to what we consider to be, as a Cabinet, a very important item on our agenda today. And this is item number 7, report on council tax premiums. And colleagues, you can find this on pages 161 to 174 of your packs. Now, this report deals with our long-term empty and second homes in our city and considers the possibility of introducing council tax premiums on these properties. As we've discussed today, and clearly has been set out in the other reports that we've covered on our agenda, we all understand and recognise the consequences of the significantly increasing demand for housing and the shortage of available housing stock across our city. These demands are both financial in terms of the cost of the council incur in short-term homelessness accommodation, but also societal in terms of the impact of this on individuals and families. In addition to a general lack of available housing, Newport also has a high number of unoccupied properties that, despite previous initiatives, have remained persistently high. As well as being a magnet for antisocial behaviour, empty properties can be a blight on neighbourhoods and local communities. Council tax premiums, if introduced, should encourage owners to take steps to bring their properties back into use. And colleagues, you will recall that in November, as a Cabinet, we agreed that a public consultation exercise should be undertaken on the public's views on the introduction of council tax premiums. And I'm pleased to say that this report provides us with the results of that consultation. I'd really like to thank the public for engaging with this consultation and providing us with the responses. We had 470 responses to the consultation, and more than 75% of respondents agreed that Newport City Council should take steps to encourage owners to bring properties back into use. Council tax premiums, if introduced, would see owners of second homes and those that leave properties empty for more than a year charged with additional council tax. Now, the objective, the purpose of this is to encourage owners to take steps to bring properties back into use. Although second homes are fewer in number, a consistent approach will also need to be taken for those underused properties as well. So therefore, colleague, the report includes recommendations to adopt council tax premiums in Newport for both second homes and long-term empty properties. As you'll be aware, the legislation that relates to this does provide some exceptions that prevent a premium being charged in some circumstances. And following feedback from the consultation and in order to address stakeholders' concerns, we are also proposing that some additional limited local exceptions are also recommended. Colleagues, if the recommendations of this report are agreed today, the matter will be taken forward to full council for a final decision to be made there. If agreed there, then these recommendations will be implemented from the 1st of April this year. So I'll just pause at this point for any comments or contributions that colleagues might like to make on this item. Can I say that was all really quick? Because Deputy Leader, Councillor Clark, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you, Leader. I'll make it short because I know other people want to speak on this. And firstly, sort of want to reiterate a massive thank you for all who took part in this consultation process. As it's been mentioned, it's not just Newport, but throughout the UK there's a housing crisis. Down to the cost of living situation, welfare benefit restrictions, change of legislation, and many other things. We feel like we're in an awful perfect storm for all the wrong reasons. So like other local authorities, having a council tax premium will help. It won't solve everything, but it will help. And within the consultation, listen, I won't take up too much time because I know others want to speak. Within the consultation, it asked or set out what the premium should be, 100, 200 or 300%. With 100% coming out with the most positive responses, which is hugely important. I think that's also in line, if you do your research, with what other councils in Wales have either brought in or are looking to bring in at this time anyway. So we're in line with that. So I feel this is a positive step for Newport. It really is. It's something which is needed. But I think it also shows, which the leader touched on, yet again we're listening to the people in Newport. We've done the consultation, we've gathered the information, and we've come to this conclusion. So a massive thank you for all who were involved in the consultation, and looking forward to moving this forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark, and thank you very much for the support that you provided with the teams on this particular item. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. As has already been noted, we are in a housing crisis, no getting away from that. And the report states there are over 9,000 residents who are on the housing register, with an obvious disconnect when you realise that there are 2,565 empty properties at this time within our boundaries. People desperately need affordable homes, and I know that our Cabinet member, Councillor Clark, has made this one of his key priorities, and I very, very much support this proposal being taken to full council, and if adopted, I know this will become part of the toolkit that will be used by Newport City Council to increase the availability of housing stock within our city. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for your support for this item, Deputy Leader. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. Not to go over the same as what's been said, but it is needed. We do need to do something. What we see that the general public don't see is the officers running around in 3 different directions trying to find somewhere to put a family in a dire emergency. They got nowhere to go. And there is genuinely no room at the inn. And as the Deputy Leader just said, there's over 2,500 empty. It's a bit of a smack in the face, to be honest, that these families are waiting and doing everything they can to get rehoused. And I fully commend Councillor Clark. He has worked like a dog on this. I know that myself. So I'm all for it. Bring it on.
Thank you very much for your support for this item, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. As you're aware, sir, I grew up in North Wales, and this has been a problem for us for decades, and it's caused a lot of social unrest up north. We grew up with holiday home issues and land banking as well, you know, where people bought land and sat on it for many years, and we saw the boom in the summer and the bust in the winter, and then we saw cinemas close, and we saw post offices close, and we saw schools close, and it had a really devastating effect on communities up in that area. While the problems are not identical in South Wales and certainly not in Newport, there's many similarities, and I think we're not just talking about housing per se, we're talking about what we're doing with buildings like the market, you know, where if you've got buildings in key areas which are running into disrepair and being run down and being allowed to run down by landlords, then that whole area gets pulled down. So what we're doing really is this is part of a regeneration of Newport, and we need those buildings back in use, and the sooner they come back into use, the better. What we can also say as well, this is a sensible move in the sense that we haven't gone for the maximum that we could do. We've gone for a sensible figure at the lower end so that we encourage those landlords and those people that can do something about it to bring those properties back into use when they're most needed. And if there's ever been a time they're most needed, I've never seen it before. And like my colleagues, I'd like to thank Councillor Clark for his work on this, and I fully support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hughes. Thank you for your support on that item. Are there any further comments on this? No? Colleagues, for us today, this paper is a really important paper, and it does mark another step forwards in terms of, as the Deputy Leader has highlighted, providing us with another tool in the toolkit in terms of bringing forwards more properties back into use here in our city. And what's important, and the point that I'd like to make here, is that whilst we are recommending that a premium is introduced, we've also listened to what the consultation has said, and it does reflect our commitment to working in partnership with property owners to bring those properties back into use. So our recommendation to full council is that this level, the level of the premium, is reasonable and is just another part of the toolkit which helps us and supports us to bring those properties back into use. But the paper mentions, as has been highlighted here today, the level of demand that we're experiencing for affordable homes across the city. And that level of demand is far exceeding supply. And certainly that's one of the reasons why we're trying really hard as a local authority to engage with partners and stakeholders, and that underpins our relationship that we're developing with the Royal Foundation to develop into innovative responses and solutions to some of the challenges that we're experiencing around the supply of affordable housing across the city as well. And colleagues, it really will be these incremental changes that we're making, the work that Councillor Clark has done with colleagues on the introduction of this premium, the work that we're doing with the Royal Foundation to try and address housing supply issues. It really will be those sustained incremental approaches that help us address some of the very, very urgent and pressing challenges that we face across the city. So having had an opportunity to fully debate and discuss the proposals in this report, our colleagues contend to agree the recommendation of the implementation of a council tax premium, which will go forward to full council for colleagues to consider at the end of this month. Thank you very much for your support for that and for your contributions to the discussion. We'll move then to item number 8 on our agenda today. This is our mid-year assessment report for 2023-24 on pages 175 to 186 of our packs. And really what this report provides is an update on the performance of our service areas against their 23-24 service plans. And you will all recall, of course, colleagues, you'll recall, last year we launched our corporate plan for 2022-27, and this corporate plan is very much based upon the manifesto commitments of the Labour administration to the people of Newport that the people of Newport voted for in the May 22 elections. So those commitments are now embedded within our corporate plan. Each of our service areas have developed their service plans on the basis of their contribution towards the delivery of the corporate plan and our strategic priorities. It's important to note, colleagues, the report is a self-reflection and a summary of the performance against these plans for the first 6 months of this financial year. Every service area has presented their updates to the Council's performance scrutiny committees, as have Cabinet colleagues where you've been there as well, to deal with questions and queries from our Councillor colleagues on performance with regard to this. Feedback and recommendations from those performance scrutiny committees are included in the report for us as a Cabinet. And there's an opportunity within that, of course, for us as a Cabinet and the Council's senior leadership team to actually consider some of those recommendations that scrutiny have made to us in that. And I'd like to pause, actually, colleagues, and give my thanks, and certainly thanks on behalf of the Cabinet, to all of the councillors across the city who participate in the scrutiny committees and take the time to really look into performance against these plans and not just challenge but also support and advise on the delivery against these targets. So a huge thank you to colleagues for their involvement in this. And if you look at the report, we can see that service areas have reported positive progress against 37 of 43 objectives, with only 6 of those remaining objectives reporting an amber, which is requiring improvement. For Council's performance measures, 61 performance measures were achieving or succeeding against their targets. Now, collectively, as a Cabinet, of course, we remain committed to supporting service areas to continue to improve and also to improve on areas that are not currently performing as highly as other areas of service provision. But one important role that we all play as councillors is to celebrate and to recognise the achievements of our service areas, considering the pressures faced by so many services. And we've heard a lot about that today. The report also includes examples of where services are making a difference to our residents, and case studies reflect the dedication and hard work of our staff to support some of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged people in Newport and continue to improve our city. We recognise moving forward that we will face some significant challenges in the delivery of the Council services, but it is important that we ensure that high performance of the authority remains a priority and that we continue to self-reflect, listen to those who use our services and improve service delivery. So I'd just like to pause at this point because I know Cabinet members, you've all been involved in developing these reports with officers that have gone to the scrutiny committees. So I'd just like to pause and invite you to put forward your own comments with regard to this report. Are there any contributions from Cabinet? Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank all the officers involved with developing my service plan. I also would like to thank the Scrutiny Committee for their sterling work at reviewing the report and asking some very fundamental, important questions regardless of the report that we presented. But I think what we had within our report was some important points that needed celebrating. And of course, I always like to celebrate what's happening in education. And I think one of the key points of this year is the ESTIN reports that have come out from our schools, all positive, no schools in special measures, outstanding reports, and we can proudly stand and say that we're the only local authority in the South East region that hasn't got any schools in special measures, and probably, I think, of the only 2 local authorities in the whole of Wales who can actually proudly say that as well. Equally, we're one of the few local authorities in Wales that has already completely completed its universal rollout of free school meals. So all our children at primary school level, foundation phase, are now getting free school meals. Things that need to be work that needs to be commended, because none of this would happen without the hard work of our head teachers, our teaching staff, Chartwells, and as well as the officers within local authority. So a huge thank you to everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader, and my personal thanks to you for the sterling leadership that you've demonstrated with that portfolio. And colleagues, you will recall, as the Deputy Leader highlighted there, the acceleration of the rollout of free school meals was an election priority for this Labour administration. And I am really proud to sit here today and listen to the Cabinet member highlight the fact that we've been able to achieve that. So thank you very much for that. Any further contributions from colleagues? Okay. Thank you very much for that. I would recommend to anybody who's watching this back or listening to actually look at the report itself, because the report does contain links to a number of case studies that really illustrate the positive work that's going on across the city. So thank you, colleagues, for your contributions to this. A huge thank you to the officers who've got us to this point. There's a huge amount of work that underpins this. So thank you to all of our officers who've got us to this. And once again, our councillor colleagues who take the time to scrutinise, to advise and support, thank you to them for working with us to deliver for the people of Newport. So on that point, colleagues, are you content to note and agree the report? Yep. Thank you. We move to item number 9 on our agenda today then, and this is our people plan for 2023 to 2028. And this is on pages 187 to 202 of the report. And as a Cabinet, we're being asked to consider the plan and agree it. Now, following the development of our corporate plan, a number of critical plans have been developed, such as the digital strategy and next year, the new strategic equality plan. So Councillor Petruni has been hard at work on these, it's fair to say. I'm really pleased today that we've been presented with our new people plan, as it's a plan that will help us attract, develop and retain the workforce that we need to deliver on our aspirations. Now, the development of the people plan themes commenced in mid-2023 with engagement with our staff, managers and trade unions. Our workforce, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me on this, is our most valuable asset. And this plan aims to set out our people priorities. Colleagues will see within the plan 4 strategic themes have emerged, and these have emerged through extensive engagement and consultation with stakeholders. These themes are representation and transformation, ensuring our workforce is more representative of the city we serve, whilst enabling a transformational and forward-thinking workforce. Employee well-being, supporting the well-being of our workforce, contributing to creating a positive working environment. Employee engagement, developing staff engagement, creating commitment and high performance, embedding our values and a willingness to deliver for our citizens. Employee experience, developing as an employer of choice and supporting recruitment and retention. Now, the plan document included within the report outlines these 4 themes, and it builds a plan for our workforce over its life cycle. The plan also provides insight into the positive actions that will support the delivery, whilst also noting the work with our employees to develop our new staff values, which will be launched alongside the plan. Now, at this point, I'd just like to pause, and I will open to contributions from Cabinet shortly. But I'd like to pay my own personal tribute here to the Chief Executive for the outstanding contribution and commitment that she has made to the transformation of this organisation. So the Chief Executive has demonstrated herself time and time again to be an outstanding leader, and I would just like to give her my personal thanks on behalf of the Cabinet for the leadership that she's shown with regard to transformation, and also thank the team for the hard work that they've done on this. Because whilst at the moment we may be looking at a plan on paper, this will not only make a difference to the services that we provide, the quality and standards of the services that we provide in future, but an important difference to our organisational culture, and we all know how important a positive organisational culture is, and to the lived work experience of all of the employees across the whole of the organisation. So thanks to the Chief Exec and the team for the leadership and the work that they've done on this. And whilst I'm also setting out my thanks to the people who've made a significant contribution in terms of leading this. Councillor Petruni, thank you for the leadership that you've shown as Cabinet Member, and I'd like to invite you to comment on the plan.
Thank you, Leader. As you rightly pointed out, our staff are everything. As politicians come and go, and administrations set their new priorities, the consistent theme that deliver for residents over the decades is our staff. If we get compliments, it's because the staff have gone over and above. And without them, as you know full well, Leader, and as all Cabinet members know in their respective portfolios, our staff are critical to the success of this city. And so far, they've done a sterling job. And as this sets out, and you covered many of the areas, but I want to emphasise on the 2028 piece. We all know the difficult times ahead. We've gone through, and the times are going ahead, and the change that's going to have to take place, facing all of us, and never more so than our staff. We've had to do more with less. For how many years now? 13 years, due to the UK government. And this strategic document and the themes set us out on that journey to support our staff, to drive innovation, to drive the right culture, as you rightly pointed out, and to give our staff the right skill sets to deliver for the residents now and in the future. And I really want to thank the team for their amazing work on this and setting the standards high, because we demand excellence, our residents demand excellence, and our staff are excellent.
Thank you for that, Councillor Petruni, and thank you once again for the support that you've shown and leadership you've shown on that. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased to support the adoption of the People Plan. I can see that it's underpinned by our core values in ensuring our workforce is well supported, well prepared for their role, and have the appropriate skill set to undertake their work. It's a really supportive document where health and well-being are clearly prioritised. It's vital that not only do we attract a highly motivated and skilled individuals who want to work for Newport City Council, but importantly, we retain them. We want a workforce who are proud to work for Newport City Council, who go home feeling fulfilled, having enjoyed their working day, and importantly, feel valued and respected. Going forward, it's important this plan achieves these objectives, and it's reassuring to see that there's already a clear action plan in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Any further comments? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. As you know, our sort of staff in social care have gone through a particularly hard time with COVID and all the challenges we've talked about tonight, really, the growing size of the city, the growing demand. And retention, I think, in social work is a particularly difficult area. Both Councillor Marshall and myself met with our social workers just before Christmas, and I was pleased to see really that the areas that they focused on as success stories at the moment around leadership, around the support they get from their peers, around the training from the council. And I think that just shows how things are going. This, and it's just to sort of reassure the staff really that this is just a point in time. This is something that we're all very committed to, and the well-being and how our staff enjoy working for Newport is something that we all take very seriously. And I'd just like to say that that I really sort of appreciate the work our social care staff do at this present time, and to bear with it, and things will just hopefully keep improving as we go on.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Are there any further comments from colleagues? I'd just like to say, colleagues, just listening to your comments, I really, quite heartwarming it is to listen to you talk from different perspectives about different service areas with regard to this, because hopefully, for those other people listening to this, what they will see is how valued our staff actually are, how we really do value the work that they do. So thank you all for your contributions. Are you content to agree the new people plan and its subsequent rollout of the forthcoming months? Yeah? Thank you all for that. We move to item number 10 then. This is the Q2 2023-24 Corporate Risk Register update, and this can be found on pages 203 to 248 of our packs. Now, it's important to note that our risk management policy and corporate risk register enable the administration and officers to effectively identify, manage and monitor those risks which could prevent us from achieving our strategic priorities and to undertake our duties as a statutory duties as a local authority. This risk report was presented to the Council's Governance and Audit Committee in November 2023, and there were no recommendations or feedback required for Cabinet to consider. So I'd like to thank our colleagues on that committee for considering that report. At the end of Q2, the Council had 43 risks recorded across our 11 service areas. And those risks that are deemed to pose the most significant risk in the delivery of our corporate plan and our services are escalated to the Council's Corporate Risk Register for monitoring. At the end of Q2, 15 risks were recorded in the register, 9 severe risks, 6 major risks. Now, in comparison to Q1, 1 risk increased our risk score from 16 to 20, and another risk score, and I'm really pleased to note this, the stability of social services providers has improved, with a risk score reducing from 20 to 16. And the remaining 14 risks remain the same as Q1. So would anybody like to comment on any of the issues highlighted in the risk register? Councillor Hughes.
Well, thank you, Leader, for mentioning that. If I'll elaborate just a little, I think if we can maybe highlight the improvements in regards to our vulnerabilities, which were in the external provider sector, a sector that itself is being hit hard by the cost of living crisis. So our teams have recruited new managers, redesigning their structures and are strengthening their resilience. So they are able to continue offering a really high level of service to our most vulnerable residents. And I'm glad to see that these improvements are in place, and this area is a reflection, I think, of the dedication and hard work, as I mentioned earlier, of our social care workforce. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Councillor Hughes, for the work that you've done with the team on that particular item. Any further comments? Okay. Colleagues, we're being asked to agree the content then and continue to monitor these risks and the actions being taken to address the risks identified in the report. Everyone content with that? Thank you. We move on then to item number 11 on our agenda, and this is our external pressures cost of living report. It's on pages 249 to 254 of the packs. And I just want to emphasise, colleagues, that as a Cabinet we've collectively decided quite some time ago now that we would continue to receive a monthly update on this and on the activities around this. It's really important that we've got an opportunity to discuss some of the issues arising around external pressures, particularly with regard to the cost of living. And it also provides us with an opportunity to highlight to our residents the support that is there for them. So as we move into 2024, we continue to see the impact of the cost of living crisis and the pressures on our housing and homelessness services. And collaboration with our partners and our communities during these challenging times remains strong and vital in supporting those in need. Now, as we know from our work with the Institute of Health Equity, as part of the Marmot region, the impact of poverty is wide-ranging. Therefore, helping school communities better understand poverty, its impact on learning, and the financial barriers to education, and how they can be reduced and removed, is a key part of the Education Services poverty strategy. And I thank you to the Cabinet Member for driving that activity. In Newport, the lead reason for homelessness continues to be the loss of rented accommodation, and rising rent costs have the potential to further increase the demand on our housing and homelessness services. Whilst we recognise the increase of the local housing allowance cap to the 30th percentile from April 2024, which I previously touched on in this meeting, we also understand the wider pressures on the private rented sector in Newport, and that this may, whilst it may help to alleviate some of the challenges for some people, it will not change those wider pressures. And the full impact of that, of course, remains to be seen. I'd also like to take the opportunity today to urge our residents who may be experiencing difficulties to contact the Council for information and signposting on the advice and support that we've got available. You can contact us in person, by phone, or by visiting our support and advice pages on our website. And of course, your councillors across all of your wards are there to help support and advise you as well. I have to say it's really encouraging to see that our newly appointed cost of living advisors are working really hard, collaborating with internal officers, including education colleagues and partner agencies, to provide advice, guidance and support to our residents across the city, with events and roadshows already planned for 2024. And I know that the Deputy Leader and I, and Councillor Harvey as the Cabinet Member, have had an opportunity to attend many of these events that we put on in 2023, and just really overawed by the commitment of all of the officers there, really, in terms of the support that's available to people, but also the range of support. And I would encourage anybody in Newport who is experiencing difficulties to get in touch with regard to that. Now, to support some of our more vulnerable citizens during the winter months, the Council has collaborated with partners and established a network of temporary spaces which can be used under the severe weather emergency protocol, providing shelter for people who sleep rough. As the leader of the Council and the chair of our One Newport partnership, I continue to advocate for partnership working as being absolutely fundamental in supporting our residents and businesses. And once again, I'd really like to reiterate my encouragement to anybody who may be in need to access the support that is available to them, And I particularly like to highlight in this section of the meeting the availability of grant funding for any groups across communities who would like to set up warm hubs. That grant funding is still available in our communities across our city, and all you need to do is get in touch with Gavo, who will be able to support you with that. So if anyone from any community groups is watching this back, or perhaps that might be reported in the media, that there is an opportunity to access those grants for those community groups who would like to set up those warm hubs and support other people in their communities. It is there, and we know we've got some very difficult and challenging weather conditions ahead. So if anybody would like to do that, please get in touch with Gavo, because that grant funding is available. So just pause there and invite any comments from Cabinet members. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. It is right to check on this every month. Looking at this report, the biggest bugbear at the minute is the mental health. It must be horrific to be sat in your house, you can't turn the lights on, you can't go and buy shopping, you can't do anything that you would normally do as a parent because you don't have any money. In 2024 now, and I say it every time I stand, how can this be right in 2024? It's gone right the way back to a them and us, and it just feels like central government look down their nose on those little minions, off they go. Why would I care about them? Well, the top and tail of it is you care about them because they're the whole reason why you came into politics in the first place. Nobody came into this to cut budgets, to cut funding, to close things. We all came into this to do something good for our residents. And if the only thing I can do before I ever leave is to make sure one of my residents got food in their cupboard, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I will defy anyone to tell me it's the wrong thing. But I also want to say thank you to the staff. Our staff are on another level amazing. Because even though I had one lady in the event and she hit a brick wall, she couldn't go left or right, so they worked out a different way of doing things for her. The lady left there in tears, but it was tears of relief. More than anything else, she knew that day she could feed her kids. That's how stark it is. So anything we can do to assist, to help in any way, shape or form, email, phone call, I don't care what ward you're in, just let us know and we can point you in the right direction. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey, and thank you for all the work that you personally have done on that. Deputy Leader.
Thank you. Can I also please thank officers within the education team for joining forces with our community team to deliver the anti-poverty roadshows in our schools. What's really welcome is this joined-up approach, which we can see is clearly working. I know this is ongoing, and I know it's also been welcomed by both schools involved and in particular the families. The provision of benefit advice, financial advice, along with support regarding school uniform, as well as other agencies being involved as well, who are attending these workshops and roadshows, is providing advice and support that is really making a difference. But importantly, equally, Leader, I want to thank Councillor Harvey, because it's her input, her support and her drive for this project, and I know how passionate she feels about this, is making that true difference. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution there, Deputy Leader. Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Leader. There was a report the other day that said that the most well-off people had earned in 3 days what all the rest of us, on average, would earn for the whole year. 3 days they've earned it. The growing inequality, I think, is really ridiculous. Yeah, it's just all going in the wrong direction for me. But I wanted to say something about the housing pressures that we're facing, and that in the past year, I've received more requests for help for housing than I did in all of the previous 5 years in total. It's a really distressing situation. And the other thing that I found really upsetting was somebody contacting me for a food parcel 3 days before Christmas. Most of us are lucky enough to be stocking up with our extra goodies for Christmas, and some people haven't even got any food to get them through the week. Not special food, not extra food, but they just haven't got anything to get them through the week. But I wanted to say thank you to Housing Department, because I know that they have helped some residents in my ward recently, and they've managed to keep them in their house by doing preventative work. And surely prevention is much better, you know, the proper way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Forsey, and thank you for highlighting, you know, that stark inequality that we do see across society. And of course, as councillors, we see this every day when we're trying to help people and support people. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. It's sort of two-part. What I've got to say here. First of all, a thank you to the homelessness team. I went out with Helen Jones, the Rough Sleeper coordinator. She picked me up on Boxing Day morning at 7 o'clock, and we went round Newport. And the relationship the teams have got with the homeless is quite incredible. And it was 2 hours which I won't forget. And again, I thank Helen and her team for what they're doing out there. And again, as Councillor Forsey said, over Christmas and that period, well, they were out. They were out on the streets, delivering breakfasts and having conversations and pointing everyone into the right direction. I'd also like to a massive thank you for all the council workers regarding the SWEP provision and putting that in place. It's not something which is just for Christmas. You know, the cold weather's coming in again, and it's hugely important. And what went on in the background, putting that together, and the meetings which, you know, if I was involved in some meetings, the other meetings which must have just gone on in the background must have been incredible. But they came through, and they need a massive thank you for that. But also it's going back to the cost of living crisis, which Councillor Harvey mentioned. You know, there's families out there who've just got through Christmas where the mortgages have gone up £200-300 a month.
More.
Absolutely. Gas and electricity has gone up £200-300 a month. Their wages haven't gone up. The Christmas with young children, with the pressures of getting the presents which are needed, you wake up under pressure, you go to sleep under pressure, and that must be immense on your mental health and the struggles. And, you know, first point is Newport is here, and I know Councillor Harvey's mentioned it, but please get in contact. Secondly, this shouldn't be happening in 2023, 2024. It really shouldn't be happening, and this lays on the doorstep of the UK government, and people should never forget that, because we're not out of it, we're nowhere near out of it, but that lays with that. But I would go back to, and I want to finish on a positive, again going back to a massive thank you for the teams involved over Christmas.
Thank you for that wise words there, Councillor Clark. Any further comments? Councillor Petruni.
Just building on the eloquent words of Councillor Clark, it seems kind of academic and kind of opaque discussion about growth in the UK economy, but that's how we start to solve the major issues we're facing and what Councillor just eloquently highlighted. I wonder if I can make a request of you, Leader. Could you write to the Prime Minister, explain to him how to grow a city? Thank
you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Petruni. And that in itself is a really interesting challenge as the leader of a city that has increased significantly over the last, where the population has increased significantly over the last 10 years. So I'm happy to take up your challenge and write to the Prime Minister to explain everything that we need for successful growth. I will advise you that my letters to that part of the country largely go unresponded to. However, I'm happy to take up that challenge. And just at this point, I'd like to thank you all really for the continued support that you show for your communities. So thank you all for that and your contributions today. Item number 12 is our One Newport summary document, and this is for information purposes, but I would like to emphasise within that, once again, thanks to partners who continue to work with us to deliver these services and make a difference to the lives of people in Newport. Item number 13, of course, is our work programme. This is on pages 255 to 262 of your packs, and can I just ask you to move acceptance of the work programme? Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your contribution on this very, very cold day. And thank you all for the continued good work. That brings the meeting to a close.